The sun set blood red over the Kansas horizon as Hope Parker's final reserves of strength abandoned her, leaving her body crumpled beside the railroad tracks like a discarded doll. Her once pristine blue traveling dress was now torn and soiled, her blonde hair falling in tangled waves around her dust-streaked face. 3 days since the train derailment. 3 days since she'd watched her fellow passengers either perish or wander off seeking help. 3 days of walking alongside the twisted metal tracks, hoping for salvation that never came. Hope's cracked lips moved in a silent prayer as she sank down beside the weathered wooden ties. The meager provisions she'd salvaged from the wreckage were gone, her water canteen empty since morning. The distant howl of coyotes made her shiver despite the lingering summer heat. With no energy left to continue and night falling quickly, she curled up beside the tracks, using her small carpetbag as a pillow. If death was coming, at least the stars above Kansas in 1878 made for a beautiful final sight. Just until morning, she whispered to herself as her eyelids grew heavy. "I'll try again in the morning." Several miles away, Rusty Quinn urged his team of horses forward, his wagon wheels cutting deep grooves into the prairie soil. At 28, Rusty had already lived several lifetimes' worth of experiences. The Civil War had taken his youth, the cattle drives his innocence, but somehow he'd managed to keep his compassion a rare commodity in these untamed territories. His ranch lay another day's ride west, but Rusty never rushed the journey home from Topeka. His supply wagon was loaded with necessities that would need to last several months: flour, coffee, ammunition, tools, and a few precious books ordered from back east. The darkening sky prompted him to consider making camp, but something instinct perhaps urged him onward. When the first glimmer of moonlight revealed the twisted railroad tracks in the distance, Rusty tensed. News of the derailment had reached Topeka 2 days prior, but reports suggested there were no survivors. Still, he guided his wagon closer, lantern held high. "Hello," he called, his deep voice carrying across the prairie. "Anyone out there?" The small form beside the tracks didn't stir at first, and Rusty's heart sank thinking he'd found yet another victim. But as he approached, the figure moved slightly, a soft moan escaping pale lips. "Madam." Rusty knelt beside Hope, gently touching her shoulder. "Madam, can you hear me?" Hope's eyelids fluttered open, her gaze unfocused. "Water," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Please." Rusty uncorked his canteen and carefully lifted her head, allowing her small sips. "Easy now. Not too fast." After a few moments, Hope's eyes cleared enough to focus on the man before her. Tall and broad-shouldered, with auburn hair and a beard that couldn't hide his youth. His eyes, kind despite their weariness, studied her with concern. "Thank you," she managed. "I thought I would die here." "Not while I'm around, madam." "Can you tell me your name?" "Hope. Hope Parker. I was traveling to Colorado when the train." Her voice broke. "I'm Rusty Quinn," he replied, removing his jacket and wrapping it around her shoulders. "And you're safe now. I've got a wagon just over yonder. Do you think you can stand if I help you?" Hope tried to rise, but swayed dangerously. Without hesitation, Rusty slipped one arm beneath her knees and the other around her shoulders, lifting her as if she weighed nothing. She couldn't help but notice the strength in his arms, the gentle way he carried her despite his rugged appearance. "My bag," she murmured against his chest. "Please, it's all I have left." Rusty nodded, retrieving her carpetbag after settling her in his wagon. He arranged blankets around her, creating a makeshift bed among his supplies. "We'll make camp soon," he promised, climbing into the driver's seat. "Get some rest, Miss Parker. You're going to be all right now." As the wagon rocked into motion, Hope found herself studying her rescuer's profile against the starlit sky. In her 23 years of life, first as a schoolteacher's daughter in Boston and then as a governess in St. Louis, she had never encountered a man quite like Rusty Quinn. There was something in his demeanor that spoke of hardship endured and battles fought, yet gentleness remained. "Where are you taking me?" she asked, her voice stronger now that she'd had water. "There's a small settlement about 3 hours' ride from here," Rusty explained. "They've got a doctor who can look you over. After that, well, we'll figure something out." Hope nodded, though anxiety gripped her. Her position as governess awaited her in Denver, but she had no money to continue her journey. Everything she owned was in her carpet bag: a few changes of clothes, a worn Bible, her mother's locket, and $23 carefully sewn into the lining of her bag. "I have nowhere to go," she admitted softly, more to herself than to Rusty. He glanced back at her, his expression unreadable in the darkness. "One problem at a time, Miss Parker. First, we get you well." True to his word, Rusty made camp after a few more miles, choosing a sheltered spot near a small creek. With practiced efficiency, he built a fire, prepared a simple meal of beans and bacon, and brewed coffee strong enough to revive the dead. Hope sat wrapped in blankets, watching him move around the camp. "You've done this before," she observed. Rusty smiled, the firelight catching in his beard. "More times than I can count. Spent most of my adult life under these stars." "Are you a cowboy?" she asked, accepting the tin plate he offered. "Used to drive cattle up to Kansas from Texas," he replied, settling across from her. "Now I've got my own spread. Small, but it's mine. Raise horses mostly, some cattle." Hope's hands trembled as she ate, her body still weak from deprivation. "I've never been west of the Mississippi before last week," she confessed. "Everything feels so vast here. So wild." "It is that," Rusty agreed. "But there's beauty in it too, once you get used to the harshness." They ate in companionable silence, the crackling fire and distant night sounds creating a peaceful backdrop. When Hope's eyelids began to droop, Rusty helped her settle onto a bedroll he'd laid out near the fire. "What about you?" she asked, noticing he'd made no preparations for his own rest. "I'll keep watch," he said simply. "Get some sleep, Miss Parker." Hope wanted to protest, but exhaustion claimed her, pulling her into the first peaceful sleep she'd had in days. Dawn broke with soft golden light spreading across the prairie. Hope woke to find Rusty already up, frying bacon and brewing fresh coffee. She sat up slowly, taking inventory of her body's complaints. Hunger, thirst, and soreness, but nothing that wouldn't heal. "Morning," Rusty greeted, handing her a cup of coffee. "How are you feeling?" "Better," Hope replied honestly, "though I fear I must look frightful." A smile tugged at his lips. "There's water in that bucket if you'd like to wash up. And I've got a clean shirt you could use, though it'll be big on you." Hope accepted both offerings gratefully. Behind a stand of bushes, she stripped off her filthy dress, washed as best she could with the cold water and small sliver of soap Rusty had provided, and donned his shirt. The rough cotton hung to her knees like a dress, but it was clean and smelled faintly of cedar and tobacco, a surprisingly comforting scent. When she returned to the fire, Rusty quickly averted his eyes, though not before she caught a flash of appreciation in his gaze. Something fluttered in her chest, an unfamiliar feeling she chose to attribute to her weakened state. "Thank you," she said, settling back by the fire. "For everything." Rusty nodded, focusing on serving her a hearty portion of bacon and hardtack. "We should reach Miller's Creek by midday. Doc Wilson can check you over." "And then what?" Hope asked, unable to keep the worry from her voice. Rusty considered her for a moment. "Then we figure out how to get you to Denver, I reckon." Hope shook her head. "I don't have enough money for passage. What little I had was in my trunk, which is likely scattered across the Kansas prairie now." "How much do you need?" "More than I have," she admitted. "The train ticket was purchased by my employer." Rusty sipped his coffee, thoughtful. "I could loan you the money." Hope's pride bristled. "I couldn't accept charity, Mr. Quinn." "Not charity," he corrected. "A loan. You can repay me once you're settled in your position." The offer was generous, perhaps too generous. Hope studied him, wondering what motivation this stranger might have for helping her. Yet everything about his demeanor suggested sincerity. "Why would you do that for someone you don't even know?" she asked. Rusty's weathered face softened. "Because someone did the same for me once, when I needed it most." Before Hope could respond, a distant rumble caught their attention. Rusty was on his feet instantly, hand moving to the revolver at his hip. He relaxed slightly when he identified the source: 3 riders approaching from the east. "Stay here," he instructed Hope, moving to intercept the newcomers. Hope watched nervously as Rusty greeted the men. Their conversation was too distant to hear, but their gestures suggested they knew each other. After a few minutes, Rusty returned. "Railroad men," he explained. "Checking the tracks and looking for survivors." His hesitation told Hope what he couldn't say aloud: they were collecting bodies. "Are there others?" "Like me?" she asked. Rusty shook his head. You're the only one they haven't accounted for. They're surprised you made it this far on foot. I followed the tracks, Hope explained. I thought someone would come along eventually. Smart thinking, Rusty acknowledged. They've asked if we've seen any personal effects. Apparently, there's been some looting. Hope's expression darkened. There's nothing left worth taking. I searched before I left the wreckage. Well, they're continuing on. We should get moving too if we want to reach town by midday. Within half an hour, they were back on the trail, Hope sitting more comfortably on the wagon seat beside Rusty. The morning sun warmed her face as they traveled, and Hope found herself studying her rescuer when he wasn't looking. The sunlight revealed auburn highlights in his hair and beard, and lines around his eyes that spoke of laughter as much as hardship. Have you lived out here long? She asked, breaking the comfortable silence. Since '65, Rusty replied. Came west after the war, looking for something I couldn't find back home in Virginia. Did you find it? A smile played at the corners of his mouth. Some days I think so. Other days, I'm still looking. What did you do before the war? Was studying to be a doctor, he said, surprising her. My father was a physician. Wanted me to follow in his footsteps. Hope considered this revelation. Why didn't you continue afterward? Rusty's hands tightened on the reins. Some things you see change a man. Couldn't stomach the idea of more blood, more suffering. He glanced at her. What about you? What takes a Boston girl to Denver? Hope wondered how he'd guessed her origins, but supposed her accent gave her away. I'm to be a governess for a banker's children. My previous employer in St. Louis gave me a recommendation when his children outgrew the need for my services. Teaching suits you, Rusty observed. You have a patient way about you. Hope felt herself blush at the compliment. I enjoy it. Children are honest in ways adults rarely are. That they are, Rusty agreed. Though I expect they can be a handful too. The best ones usually are, Hope replied with a smile. Their conversation flowed easily as the miles passed beneath the wagon wheels. Hope learned that Rusty's ranch was called Whispering Pines, though he admitted with a chuckle that there wasn't a pine tree for 100 miles. He'd named it after a place from his childhood, a memory he held dear. In turn, she told him about growing up the daughter of a schoolteacher who valued education above all else, about losing both parents to influenza within months of each other, and about making her own way since the age of 18. By the time the small settlement of Miller's Creek appeared on the horizon, Hope felt as though she'd known Rusty Quinn for years rather than hours. There was an ease between them that defied explanation, a comfort that went beyond mere gratitude for rescue. Miller's Creek proved to be little more than a wide spot in the trail, a general store, a saloon, a small church, and a cluster of modest homes. The building Rusty guided the wagon toward stood apart from the others, a simple cabin with a sign proclaiming Dr. Wilson, physician and surgeon. An elderly man with spectacles perched on his nose emerged at the sound of the wagon. Rusty Quinn, didn't expect to see you back so soon. Trouble at the ranch? No trouble at mine, Doc, Rusty replied, jumping down from the wagon. But I've got someone here who could use your attention. Dr. Wilson's eyes widened when he saw Hope. Good heavens, is this one of the derailment survivors? We'd given up hope. She was walking the tracks when I found her last night, Rusty explained, helping Hope down from the wagon. Dehydrated and exhausted, but she's got spirit. The doctor ushered them inside, clucking sympathetically as he examined Hope. His gentle hands checked for broken bones. His stethoscope listened to her heart and lungs, and his questions were direct but kind. Finally, he stepped back with a satisfied nod. You're remarkably well, considering what you've been through, Miss Parker. A few days of rest and proper nourishment should set you right. Thank you, Doctor, Hope replied. But I'm afraid I have no way to pay you and nowhere to stay. Dr. Wilson waved away her concerns. Nonsense. My wife and I have a spare room you're welcome to use. And as for payment, well, consider it professional courtesy. We don't often get survivors out here. Rusty, who had been waiting quietly in the corner, cleared his throat. That's mighty generous, Doc, but I've been thinking. Miss Parker here needs to get to Denver for a position, but she's lost her funds. I was wondering if Mrs. Holloway still needed help at the store. The doctor's eyebrows rose. As a matter of fact, she was just complaining yesterday about managing alone. Her girl left to get married last month. Hope looked between the two men. Are you suggesting I work here? In Miller's Creek? Rusty nodded. just until you earn enough for passage to Denver. The store does good business with the surrounding ranches and passing travelers. Shouldn't take more than a few weeks. But my position, I could ride to the telegraph office in Cottonwood Springs tomorrow, Rusty offered. Send word to your employer explaining the circumstances. Most folks would understand a delay given what you've been through. Hope considered the proposal. The idea of staying longer in this unfamiliar territory should have terrified her, but something about it felt right. Perhaps it was the doctor's kindness, or the way Rusty seemed determined to help her find her footing. You would do that for me? She asked Rusty. His eyes, warm and steady, met hers. I would. The doctor looked between them with a knowing smile. Well, that settles it then. Let me introduce you to Mrs. Holloway while Rusty sees to your bags. The general store occupied the largest building in Miller's Creek, its shelves stocked with everything from foodstuffs to farm implements. Mrs. Holloway, a plump woman with silver-streaked dark hair, took one look at Hope and immediately wrapped her in a motherly hug. You poor dear. Of course you can stay and work here. I've got a room above the store that's yours for as long as you need it. Hope was overwhelmed by the woman's immediate acceptance. Thank you, Mrs. Holloway. I promise to work hard. Clara, please, the woman insisted. And I've no doubt you will. Anyone who survives what you have must have determination to spare. By evening, Hope was settled in the small but clean room above the store, wearing a borrowed dress and feeling more human than she had in days. Rusty came to check on her before heading to the saloon where he'd take a room for the night. You're looking better already, he observed, standing somewhat awkwardly in the doorway of her room. More color in your cheeks. Hope smiled. Clara fed me enough for 3 people and insisted I take a proper bath. I feel nearly myself again. Rusty nodded, his hat in his hands. I'll head to Cottonwood Springs at first light to send that telegram. Anything specific you want me to say? Just explain what happened and that I'll arrive as soon as I can, Hope replied. And Rusty, thank you. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't found me. Something flickered in his eyes, an emotion Hope couldn't quite name. Get some rest, Hope. I'll see you when I return. True to his word, Rusty departed at dawn, pushing his horse hard to reach Cottonwood Springs and back in a single day. By the time he returned, stars were shining above Miller's Creek, and most businesses had closed for the night. Only the saloon remained lit, its piano music spilling into the street. To his surprise, a lamp still burned in the general store. Through the window, he could see Hope arranging items on shelves, her movements precise and efficient. He tied his horse to the hitching post and tapped lightly on the door. Hope's face brightened when she saw him. You're back. Come in, please. Should be locked up at this hour, Rusty commented as he stepped inside. Clara went to check on a sick friend. I offered to finish the inventory, Hope explained. Did you send the telegram? Rusty nodded, producing a yellow paper from his pocket. Got a reply too. Hope took it with trembling fingers, her eyes scanning the brief message. Position filled stop, could not wait stop regret inconvenience, stop her shoulders slumped. Oh, Rusty stepped closer. I'm sorry, Hope. She folded the paper carefully, her expression composed despite the disappointment evident in her eyes. It's not your fault. These things happen. What will you do now? Hope managed a small smile. Continue working here, I suppose. Save money for passage back east. There will be other positions. Rusty watched her resume her inventory, admiring her resilience. I'll be heading back to my ranch tomorrow, he said after a moment. Oh, Hope's hands stilled. Of course. You've already delayed your return on my account. I was thinking. Rusty cleared his throat. My foreman's wife used to help with the house, but they moved on last winter. Place could use a woman's touch. And I've got a small school building, built for the ranch hand's children. No teacher, though. Hope turned to face him fully. Are you offering me a position, Mr. Quinn? I am, he confirmed. Room, board, and wages. You'd have your own cabin, small but comfortable. And you'd be helping children who otherwise wouldn't get much education out there. The offer was unexpected, and Hope found herself considering it seriously. How many children? 6, last count. Ages 5 to 12. Ranch hands kids, plus a couple from neighboring homesteads. Hope bit her lip. I don't know the first thing about ranch life. You know about teaching, Rusty pointed out. And you've already proven you can handle adversity. Their eyes met across the store, and something passed between them, an understanding, perhaps, or the recognition of a connection neither had anticipated. I need to think about it, Hope said softly. Rusty nodded. Fair enough. I'll be at the saloon if you decide. After he left, Hope finished her inventory work mechanically, her mind churning with possibilities. When Clara returned, she shared Rusty's offer, seeking the older woman's perspective. Whispering Pines is a good place, Clara said thoughtfully. Rusty Quinn is respected hereabouts. Works his men hard, but treats them fair. And he's right, those children out there need schooling. But to live on a ranch, so isolated. Hope worried. Clara's eyes twinkled. Rusty makes the trip to town regular for supplies. You wouldn't be completely cut off. And between you and me, that man could use someone like you in his life. Been alone too long. Hope felt her cheeks warm. He's offering me employment, not courtship. For now, Clara replied with a knowing smile. That night, Hope barely slept, weighing her options until dawn colored the sky. By the time she dressed and descended to the store, her decision was made. She found Rusty loading supplies into his wagon outside. I accept your offer, she said without preamble. On one condition. Rusty straightened, eyebrows raised. Name it. I want to be treated as an equal, not a charity case. I'll earn my keep. A slow smile spread across Rusty's face. Never doubted you would. When can you be ready to leave? I am ready, Hope replied, indicating her carpet bag. Everything I own is right here. They departed Miller's Creek mid-morning after heartfelt goodbyes from Clara and Dr. Wilson. Hope sat beside Rusty on the wagon seat, her heart lighter than it had been in days despite the uncertainty ahead. The prairie stretched before them, vast and golden in the autumn light. It's beautiful, she murmured as they crested a rise, revealing miles of rolling grassland dotted with wildflowers. Wait until you see the ranch, Rusty replied, pride evident in his voice. There's a creek that runs along the northern boundary. In spring, it's lined with wildflowers. Best sight in Kansas, if you ask me. Hope glanced at him, struck by the passion in his tone. You truly love it there. It's home, he said simply. Took me a long time to find it. The journey to Whispering Pines took most of the day, with Rusty pointing out landmarks and sharing stories of the region. By the time they approached the ranch in the golden light of late afternoon, Hope felt as though she'd been given a glimpse into Rusty's soul, his connection to the land, his respect for its harshness and beauty, his quiet determination to build something lasting. Whispering Pines Ranch announced itself with a sturdy gate bearing its name. Beyond stretched well-maintained fences enclosing pastures where horses grazed. A cluster of buildings formed the heart of the ranch, a two-story main house built of logs and stone, several smaller cabins, a large barn, and various outbuildings. In a clearing slightly apart stood a small schoolhouse, its bell tower visible above the surrounding trees. As they approached, several men emerged from the barn, and a woman with two small children came out onto the porch of one of the cabins. Rusty raised his hand in greeting, a genuine smile transforming his face. Welcome to Whispering Pines, he said to Hope as he guided the wagon toward the main house. The next few days passed in a blur of introductions and adjustments. Hope met the ranch hands and their families, explored the schoolhouse where she would teach, and settled into the small cabin Rusty had prepared for her. To her surprise, it was well appointed with a comfortable bed, a writing desk, bookshelves stocked with classics, and even a small piano. This is far nicer than I expected, she told Rusty when he came to check on her after the first night. Built it for my mother, he explained, a shadow crossing his face. Always hoped she'd come west to join me, but she passed before she could make the journey. Hope touched his arm gently. I'm sorry. Was a long time ago, he said, though the pain in his eyes suggested otherwise. I'm glad someone's using it now. Hope began teaching 3 days after their arrival, her 6 pupils proving to be bright and eager despite their varied educational backgrounds. The oldest, 12-year-old Emma, daughter of Rusty's foreman, quickly became Hope's unofficial assistant, helping the younger children with their lessons. Rusty often stopped by the schoolhouse, ostensibly to check if Hope needed anything, but she noticed the way his eyes lit up when interacting with the children. He sometimes stayed to listen to their reading or examine their arithmetic, offering encouragement and occasionally demonstrating practical applications of their lessons. You'd have made a fine teacher yourself, Hope observed one afternoon as they walked back to the main house together. Rusty shook his head. I lack the patience you have. Besides, running this ranch keeps me busy enough. Yet you made building a school a priority, she pointed out. That says something about what you value. He glanced at her, surprised by her insight. My father believed education was what separated men from animals. One of the few things we agreed on. You've created something remarkable here, Hope said sincerely. These families, this community, it's a testament to your vision. A flush crept up Rusty's neck, visible above his collar. Just trying to do right by the people who depend on me. As autumn deepened, Hope found herself increasingly integrated into ranch life. She helped with canning and preserving alongside the other women, learned to ride from Rusty himself, and even assisted with basic veterinary care when one of the ranch hand's daughters brought her an injured rabbit. Most evenings, she joined Rusty for dinner in the main house, where their conversations ranged from literature to politics to their childhoods. Sometimes they simply sat in comfortable silence before the fire, Hope mending or reading while Rusty worked on ranch accounts or carved small wooden animals for the children. It was during one such evening in late October that Hope realized she no longer thought about returning east. Somewhere along the way, Whispering Pines had begun to feel like home. Penny for your thoughts, Rusty said, looking up from his ledger to find her staring into the fire. I was just thinking about how different my life is now from what I expected, Hope admitted. A month ago, I was headed to Denver to be a governess. Now I'm teaching in a one-room schoolhouse on a Kansas ranch and learning to make biscuits from Mrs. Thornton. Rusty set aside his work. Do you regret it? Taking the position here. Hope met his gaze steadily. Not for a moment. Something shifted in the air between them. A tension that had been building for weeks finally acknowledged. Rusty moved from his chair to sit beside her on the sofa, his hand finding hers. I found you beside those tracks thinking I was just doing what anyone would do, he said quietly. Never imagined you'd become so important to me so quickly. Hope's heart raced as she turned her hand to entwine her fingers with his. I was lost in more ways than one when you found me. Not just physically, but in my life. I'd been following tracks laid by others, never considering I might find happiness off the planned route. Rusty's free hand came up to gently touch her cheek. And have you? Found happiness here. I found something I wasn't looking for, Hope whispered. Something I didn't know I needed until I had it. When Rusty kissed her, it felt like coming home after a long journey. His lips were gentle against hers, his hand cradling her face as if she were something precious. Hope leaned into him, her arms sliding around his neck as the kiss deepened, becoming a promise of things to come. They married as winter's first snow-dusted Whispering Pines, a small ceremony in the ranch's main house with the families of the ranch hands as witnesses. Hope wore a dress of deep blue velvet that Clara had helped her make, and Rusty looked almost boyish in his nervousness as he spoke his vows. Never thought I'd find love beside a broken railway track, he whispered as they danced their first dance as husband and wife. But there you were, waiting for me to find you. Hope smiled up at him, her heart full to bursting. I wasn't just waiting for help that night. I was waiting for you, though I didn't know it then. As the years passed, Whispering Pines flourished under their combined care. The school grew to accommodate more children as the surrounding area developed. Hope eventually hired another teacher to help, allowing her to divide her time between teaching and managing the expanding operations of the ranch alongside Rusty. Their family grew too, first with twin boys who inherited their father's auburn hair and their mother's quick mind, then a daughter whose gentle spirit and determined nature reminded everyone of both her parents. The cabin where Hope had first lived became a library for the ranch, filled with books they collected on their occasional trips east. On the 10th anniversary of the day Rusty found Hope beside the tracks, they stood together on the rise overlooking their land. The ranch had grown prosperous, with well-maintained buildings, healthy herds, and flourishing orchards. But more important was the community. They'd built, a place where education was valued, where families could thrive, where hope wasn't just a name but a way of life. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd made it to Denver? Rusty asked, his arm around Hope's waist. She leaned into his embrace, watching their children play in the distance. Sometimes. But then I remember that some derailments are actually course corrections. I wasn't meant to be in Denver. I was meant to be right here, with you. Rusty turned to face her fully, his eyes reflecting the same love they had shown her that night by the fireside a decade earlier. Best wrong turn I ever made, finding you beside those tracks. Hope reached up to touch his face, now weathered by years of sun and wind, but still handsome to her eyes. It wasn't the wrong turn, Rusty. It was the only turn that mattered. Every track I followed led me to you. As the sun set over whispering pines, casting long shadows across the land they'd built together, Hope knew with absolute certainty that sometimes the journey itself matters more than the destination. That sometimes salvation comes not in the form we expect, but in the form we need most. And sometimes it takes getting lost to truly be found.